Hi everyone, Myra here, back with another installment of Storytime. We are continuing our story of the Dancing Cats of Applesap. We're ready to start Chapter 7. Maybe you need some food for thought, Miss Tooney said. There is nothing like a hot fudge sundae for stirring up brain cells. No thanks, I'm not hungry, said Melba. She was sitting on the stool, doing her best to think straight and fast. It wasn't something she was very good at. Victor, of course, was the fast thinker in the family. With him around all the time, Melba hadn't got much practice on making plans over the years. She was used to standing about saying things like, "What shall we do now, Victor?" Or, "Victor, are you sure it'll work?" Melba wished her brother was here to take over. He would have about 10 plans ready in about as many minutes, and being older, he could probably carry them out better. "How about if I ask Victor? He'd know what to do," Melba asked Miss Tooney. "Not on your life," she squawked in alarm. "I'm not letting that gunslinger anywhere near my cats. The only plan he'd think of is how to get them out in some field for target practice." "I guess you're right," admitted Melba. She pushed 2 cats out of her lap and put her elbows on the counter. "I can see we're crowding you, said Miss Tooney. "Nobody can think with a bunch of cats breathing in her face. We'll take ourselves off to the back room and let you alone for a while. It's feeding time anyhow." "That's all right," said Melba, but Miss Tooney put her 2 fingers in her mouth and blew a low, sharp whistle. It was answered by a bustle from all corners, an unfurling of cat tails and a beat of cat paws marching across the room. Melba swiveled around on her stool to watch the exodus. To her surprise, the cats did not come forth in a pushing, scampering jumble. Instead, they lined up, head to tail to head, in the sort of queue you see in front of the movie theater on a first night run. How is this? Each cat seemed to know its exact place in the lineup. While some cats waited their turn, others dropped into line, one at a time, in what appeared to be a well-learned order. There was no hissing, no scratching to get ahead. Quietly, as if it were the sort of things cats did more naturally than any other, they took their places and stood at attention, their tails shot straight up in the air. Broken down, earless and legless, they looked like a proud column of old soldiers about to set off down Main Street for the Memorial Day parade. When the last cat was in place, the line went the length of the store. It ran out of space at the comic book rack, sailed around and doubled back to the lipstick counter, and continued along to where the rubber gloves and shower caps were shelved. There it tapered off, and in silence each cat looked ahead through the tail of the one before it, waiting for further signal. Here's a picture. It came another low whistle from Miss Tooney. Forward surging the line into the back room, while Miss Tooney, bending at the waist, gave a fond rub to each back passing through. When the last cat had passed, she turned proudly to Melba and said, in keeping with the military air of the procession, When the last cat had passed, she turned proudly to Melba and, in keeping with the military air of the procession, dashed off a stern salute. Sorry for the delay, she said apologetically. "It doesn't do to have them herding about. Tears up the place, and then old Jigs is cross." "But," Melba gasped. "Oh, the cats understand quite well," Miss Tooney went on. "They've run a tight ship from the beginning. I guess they figured out early on that order was the key to staying on in this store. You know, out on his own and singly, a cat doesn't appear to have much sense or order. People always complain that cats have minds of their own and lead stubborn, independent lives, and that's true. It's true for any animal that lives apart. But get a mass of smart animals together, whether it's elephants, ants, or cats, and you'll see how order gets set up right away. Everybody pitches in to make life more bearable for himself and everybody else. When you're living at close quarters, it's the only possible way of getting along." "That's fantastic!" exclaimed Melba. "What else do they do besides march?" "Nothing else that I know of," shrugged Miss Tooney. "And it's not so fantastic, really. Look at the circus. It's got ponies and dogs and tigers walking about in lines all over the place, and doing a lot more besides." "That's right," said Melba. "A lot more besides. You could work up an act with those cats and join the circus. Why haven't you done it?" "The circus?" said Miss Tooney scornfully. "My cats are not traveling performers. They're quiet, ordinary folk who want to live together in quiet, ordinary ways. It's not so much to ask, is it? A roof over one's head and a regular dinner hour." Miss Tooney took hold of her handkerchief and swabbed her nose violently. "Now you sit there and think," she barked at Melba. Then she swayed off tragically into the back room after the cats. Melba sat on at the counter, flicking dead flies to the floor in a dreamy way. As she sat, a smile spread over her face. Flick went a fly off the counter. Tick went a part of her brain. Melba was launching the 10th or 11th fly when the idea came. A sort of crazy idea it was, but she couldn't be choosy at a time like this. "Miss Tooney!" yelled Melba. "Miss Tooney, come here!" "It's funny," says Melba, reappearing suddenly from the front porch, but when people expect you to do a thing, put their trust in you somehow, then suddenly you begin to think maybe you can do it. And before you know it, even if you're shy as a groundhog, you find you have done it and that it wasn't very hard at all. For instance, I'm a little nervous right now, maybe you've noticed, about calling up the Guinness Book of World Records. They're a big outfit. They don't like to be bothered with nobodies from places like Applesap, New York. Maybe they'll laugh when they hear about the cats and tell me to go fly a kite. Maybe they'll hang up in my face. I'm nervous about it, but listen. Now that I've told you that I'm going to do it, you kind of expect me to go through with it, right? And since you expect me to do it, I feel a little better about picking up the phone. You're on my side, backing me up, and if you see what I mean. So here goes. I'm really calling them right now. Chapter 8. While the cats feasted on black raspberry ice cream and hot dogs, might as well give them the works, sniffed Miss Tooney. Nobody else is going to buy this stuff now. The old lady listened to Melba's plan. She blinked and scratched her ear, then she shook her head. "It'll never work," said Miss Tooney. "Better think of something else." "Why wouldn't it work?" asked Melba. "The cats would be doing the same thing they do now, only out where people can see 'em." "Listen," said Miss Tooney, waving off a fly. "It's one thing to march around when dinner is waiting in the next room. Quite another to go parading along Main Street. My cats are afraid of that street anyhow. They've got bad memories of being mowed down out there." "We could pack a lunch," urged Melba. "They'd follow you if they knew you were carrying food." "Can't say whether they would at all," grumbled Miss Tooney. "We'd go tomorrow afternoon. It's Sunday and people aren't out driving around so much," said Melba, feeling suddenly a little like Victor. "Most people are hanging around their backyards wondering what to do next. Sunday is slack time in Applesap. Just the time to draw attention to ourselves." "Now see here," snapped Miss Tooney. "I'm not going to have my cats making fools of themselves to entertain a few nitwits lolling around after Sunday dinner. And what would happen after that? I don't see where this would lead." "It would lead," said Melba, polishing her glasses with determination, "right back to the store. Don't you see, Miss Tooney? We need customers, and fast. Why, we'll have every kid in town following the cats down the street, and every man and woman close behind wondering what's going on. And when they get here, they'll be meeting up with each other and milling around and talking about the cats, and that's when some of them will start wanting a coffee or a soda, and others will start remembering little things like pipe cleaners or shower caps that they need, and the next day more people—" "And the Super Queen is closed on Sunday," cut in Miss Tooney. "That's right," shouted Melba, just remembering. "And then they'll come to get what they can't get anywhere else for once," snickering Mrs. Tooney, showing her first healthy interest in customers in year. "And just to celebrate Jigs staying open on Sundays," said Melba, as if it were always part of the plan, "you'll be serving free ice cream cones." "Now wait a minute," coughed Miss Tooney, pulling up short. "I've never in my life heard Jigs giving away free ice cream cones. He's always been a straight businessman, no slick advertising, no come-on tricks, no free giveaways." "Of course," she said slyly, "he needn't know what we're up to." Miss Tooney shot a thoughtful look through the front windows, opened her mouth to say something else, and suddenly closed it with a click. "Hush down," she told Melba. "Jigs is here. That's his car I see driving up." She made a dash toward the back room for the cats. "I don't know what that man thinks," she called in to Melba, "but he's never yet figured out it's his goods keeping these cats from starvation." Hoot went her low whistle, and in an instant the cats marched out in double time, and their food trays were slung in the sink for washing. Then everybody fell into position in his usual pile or under his usual rack. By the time Mr. Jigs arrived, small and yellow, and toting a large briefcase stuffed with final sales papers, Miss Toonie had her face in a movie magazine. Mr. Jigs shuffled gloomily through the store without a word. When he stopped to pick up his guitar from behind the drug counter, 100 cattails twitched, and 199 eyes watched the movement intently. Mr. Jigs passed out of sight into the back room. Soon the store was filled with the sound of his long, sad strums again. All around Melba the cats, apparently satisfied that nothing unusual was afoot, were closing their eyes and resting their chins on their paws. A general purr arose, vibrating the air like the noise crickets make on a warm moonlit evening. If Miss Toonie was irritated by Mr. Jigs' strumming, the cats, Melba noticed, were soothed by it. They loved the music clearly, and listening herself, Melba had to admit its beauty. The melodies were a little sad, perhaps, but beautiful, as sad music is that comes straight from the heart. "Psst!" hissed Miss Toonie, interrupting the sleepy quiet. She beckoned Melba closer. "We can't talk here," she whispered. "If I know old Jigs, and after all these years I guess I know him, he's socked in for the evening with that instrument." "I've got to go home anyway," said Melba apologetically. "It's almost dinner time, and my parents will be wondering where I am." Here's another picture. I get it. It's them whispering their little plans together. "Right," said Miss Toonie. "I'll meet you back here at 8 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning. We won't have to worry about Jigs then. He spends his Sundays locked up in his house with the shades drawn." "Why does he do that?" asked Melba, getting down from her stool. "Who knows?" whispered the old lady. "He used to be a nice regular fellow, a man who could hold his head up in town and feel proud of himself. Why, he'd walk down the street and people would take their hats off to him and ask him for Sunday dinner and such." Miss Toonie shook her head. "That was a long time ago, before the Super Queen came to town. Afterward, when business began to fall off, he went into hiding. I guess he couldn't face up to the folks who used to be his customers, but had gone over to the Super Queen. He's still a proud man, that Jigs," said Miss Toonie wistfully. "But spineless," she added, with an ill-tempered snap, and she gazed fiercely at the cats who lay about her like children in soft, sleepy piles. Then, smoothing her skirt down, she came around the end of the counter to fetch her coat and hat. A minute later she was holding the door open for Melba, and the two went out in the rain, groping to raise their umbrellas against the wet and the trickle. That's the end of Chapter 8. Tune in next time and we'll continue with Chapter 9. Thanks for watching. Meow for now.